So this is Synopsis, a series of conversations with international composers. Today I'm hosting Zhuosheng Jin. Jin is currently an assistant professor at Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and is the founder and organizer of MUS Talks, lecture series, and the Salon concert series at the school. He holds degrees from Oberlin College, Boston University, and McGill University. His teachers include Philippe Leroux, Josh Levine, and Xiaozhang Ye, and more. Zhuosheng, welcome. Nice to have you here. And please say a couple of words to continue the introduction.
Okay. Thank you, Neža, and I'm very happy to be here to introduce my composition and some of the compositional thoughts. Hi, everyone. Okay.
Lovely.
Good.
Yeah, and
Cool.
please tell me where would you start when presenting your this is a conversation about your compositional practice when
Okay.
let's say approaching that subject, where would you start at? Maybe what's like how do you work? What would you say for someone that goes to listen to your concert, if anything at all? Where would you start with that subject?
I see. I started to compose when I was 13, actually 12 and a half. So I start to write music in a pretty early age. And I did my high school at the high school attached to the Central Conservatory of Music in Beijing, where I was already majoring in composition and studying with Xiaogang Ye, one of the most prestigious Chinese composer in China. So at that time, my stuff, because at that time in China, the music that I mainly listened to was from Debussy, Bartok, Second Vienna School, you know, up to maybe George Crumb. Not a lot of contemporary composers, let's say at that time, were very famous or popular or even known in China. So in my school, everyone wrote from late romantic, well, not everyone, but most of the people, they wrote from late romantic to neoclassic style composition work. So that was my environment at that time. So my music was kind of atonal and towards, let's say, late 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, until I think the third year of my undergraduate. I went to Oberlin College to do my undergraduate and study with Josh Levin. So at the third year in my college, I took a seminar course called Spectral Music, and I learned and listened to and analyzed Tristan Mihai, Duhapise, and so on and so forth. And things then, Spectral Music became one of the most important compositional sources of mine until today, actually. So today I would say my composition approach or my composition works are highly affected or influenced by spectral music. But I try to find my own language, which is subtle. I don't even know how to say it very precisely in words. Yeah, but I have some of habit of composing music. One, that I always need a kind of extra musical reason to start to compose a piece. For example, for some people, they can just um, start to compose a piece by two notes, or by a sound. Beep. Then they can, elaborate the sound and make it a music texture and so on and so forth. For me, it's not always like that. I always need an extra musical reason, which is often not abstract, to kind of push me to write a piece. It could be a walk on the street. It could be an encounter with a friend. It could be some very interesting sound that I heard when I was on street in the afternoon. It could be a political event. It could be a cultural element, for example, a folklore melody or whatever. It could be anything, but it must be something to be a reason to trigger me, to inspire me, or to help me to write a piece. And then I can try to find uh, the notes, try to find a proper sound or proper sounds that can describe the topic that I found that caused the piece. That's one thing that I think when I talk about my compositional practice is very important to mention. And the other thing is that I have some um, ways that I used very often when composing a piece. For example, I use a software called Spare. Um, so I have a lot of pre-recorded sound. It could be any sound, like 5 portions of sounds, each stands half seconds that I recorded on the street this afternoon, and I analyzed them and I put these 5 sounds as the pitch wise as the bass pitch wise in my piece. You know what I mean? So I record a lot of sound, and I try to use these sounds as part of my compositional source or timbral source or pitchwise or source in pitchwise. So this is another well, also I do this treatment of the source, distortion, modulation, so on and so forth. But I mainly compose for acoustic. I don't write electronic music. I write very few acoustic music, mostly in my college, when I was in college for courses. So, but I have this computer assistant process that helps me to find the pitches of many of my work. So I think these are the two main important things that I like to mention. Yeah.
Yeah, great, because this opens quite some questions for me here. First of all, if we return to what you said at the beginning, it's interesting to hear for me, who I don't know at this point how classical music education in China works exactly. So it's interesting to hear when you mention only European names, Debussy, Bartok, and Second Viennese School. Just curiosity, do you also in the school work with classical composers, with music, classical Chinese music?
Classic Chinese music is called, well, Chinese music in here, and it's a different department. Western music and Chinese music, or let's say we call it traditional music, they are different.
Yeah.
So composers composing for traditional Chinese orchestra or traditional Chinese music but almost all of them underwent a westernized musical education because Chinese music is very different. They have different musical approach. They have different way to learn. So we have people majoring in traditional Chinese music. We
Yes,
also
which is
there's
called
music
Guo Yue, right? Guo Yue,
古乐. Well, it's
or not?
called 民乐 here in China, and it's called 国乐 in Taiwan. And I believe it called 古乐 somewhere else. But 古乐 means the to keep the traditional practice of traditional Chinese music.
Yeah.
It's again another thing. So we compose for traditional Chinese music, Chinese instrument, but all of us, almost all of, or most of us underwent a westernized, as I told you before,
Yeah.
compositional education. And there are Chinese music education, but that's a different thing. That's a different department, a
However,
different
I actually meant if you also studied Chinese composers that have undergone the Western music education.
Yes, we study Chinese composer. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned Western composer just because they are more familiar for you. Because if I mention Chinese composer, you don't know, that would
True.
not mean anything. So yes, we study bunch of people
Yeah.
from traditional classic music to late romantic to neoclassic. But we don't have at the time I was in high school, we don't have the full perspective or full vision of what is going on in the world
Yeah.
at
And
that
that's what
time.
you wanted to say,
Now,
that you studied Debussy and Second Viennese, right? That's what you wanted to say with
right
that.
now, now I think it's different. Now I think young students in China, because of the internet, they know pretty much the same thing as a European students know.
Yeah.
If they still choose to write neoclassic, it would be more like a personal decision or a decision based on the environment that they're in. But at that time, it was more like the natural result of my compositional study.
And
Yeah,
to move from that question back to more your practice, you were mentioning the necessity of an extra musical reason, which
mhm.
opens up this interesting question of what does music consist of, what is extra musical, and in composition, how does it, how can you convey your understanding of that? What is extra musical, for example, in your composition? If you know, maybe it's what I'm trying to allude to is, or just put on the table is, perhaps in that case, the those extra musicals that you were mentioning simply become a part of the music. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay. First of all, it's very personal. I just simply cannot start with nothing, always purely abstract things. For me, two notes, for example, because that was the example that I just used, are not enough for me to start writing a music. I must need something else. I need a reason, you know. For example, if I want to eat a cake, I must need a reason. This cake is my dinner. If I don't eat it, I don't have anything else to eat. That would be a good reason. This cake is made by a very famous cook, which means it could be very delicious, or it's from a very famous restaurant. I must try. That would be another reason, so on and so forth. To write a music is similar for me. I must convince myself why should I write the music. I must to have a topic, and it's personal. And because it's personal, I actually, let's put it in that way, I actually do not very much care whether the audience or how much the audience can perceive the extra musical part of my music composition. For example, I had a piece. I just thought about this. I think it would be a good example. I had a piece. It was a vocal piece premiered in 2015 in Beijing. It was a piece based on a poem that I wrote. By the way, I often use uh, literature or painting or film as the extra source, the extra musical reason for my composition. So that was a vocal piece based on a poem that I wrote, and the poem was about a unfinished, a home that it's there, but it will never be existed. A home that the home that is part of you originally, but you will never be reached. It will never be reached. I mean, the home will never be reached by you. It's about this kind of thing, about an eternal lost of of home, a home of homelessness, as they put it in that way. So it's a piece that has an environment, an atmosphere uh, of sad, let's say sorrowful, something like that. I hate to use this very clear words to describe it, but I think you understand me. And then the piece was performed, and then after the concert, a teenager, about 13, 14 years old boy, came to me with his grandma, I think. And he told to me, Mr. Jin, congrats to your piece. It was a very interesting piece. I heard a UFO flew by my head when I hear the sound of your piece. So that work was nothing to do with UFO. It was purely the boy's imagination. But I feel very happy. I allow the audience to feel anything about my music. When I was saying that I need an extra musical reason, I was talking about a compositional process. For me, I need to write and finish a piece. But how an audience perceive, what an audience can hear, or whether an audience will hear the same thing when they read or not reading the program notes, would be uncontrolled by the composer. Let's put it in another way. When a piece was done, it had its own life. It would no longer be controlled. Its life would no longer be controlled anymore by the composer. So I think it's separate thing. There are two separate things. One is the piece being written. Two is the piece being heard. I would suggest, but it's very personal, but I would suggest that a composer should give as less as possible pressure to the audience to force them to listen to a work in a certain kind of way. Certainly, composer can suggest by program notes or by presentation, because composers do presentations to talk about their music, but for the audience, especially the, let's say, uneducated audience, well, it's a discriminative term, but audience that didn't undergo the same kind of musical education as a composer, they must be allowed to perceive a music in their own way, to love the sounds that they hear. If they are forced to know a lot of things about the music, whether it's technical or about background or whatever. It will only give them barrier to listen to the music. In other words, contemporary music become too difficult to hear because you need to know so many things before hearing that. I don't think this process is necessary. The audiences choose, they decide in whichever way they want to listen to my music. So this, hope I answered your question.
Yes, I think that this misconception of, at least for many of the musics, I think this misconception of having to know a lot of things to be able to hear is already very present, especially in reception of contemporary music. At least in my experience, it's something I notice a lot, especially with people that perhaps don't are not in tight contact with music, with live music every day, especially of the Western tradition. Of course, that is our context, um, and you did answer perfectly. The question then that also arises, I mean, my observation is, therefore, you see necessity to find a reason, extra musical, to write the piece. What makes that? I mean, if I stretch that, you need to have a reason to write, but you find it necessary to find a reason. So does that mean you find it necessary to compose? If that is so, why composition in the first place? Perhaps a funny question, but why do you compose? Why? What brought? I mean,
I also
yeah.
write words, literature. I wrote poems, I wrote novel, I wrote short stories, I wrote screen drama. I also film. I do film. I am also a performer of stage work. I do a lot of things. It's just amongst all the creative things, composition became my job. That's it. I wouldn't say that I like to write music more than words. It was just because I entered, a music school when I was 13 and until today. So it became my job. And I teach composition, I teach music in the university. I got monthly salary from the university. I use music composition as a way to survive. So for what I understood, you asked me why must it be music, but not other things. It was random, let's say in that way, because I love to write poems at least at the same level as I love to write music. And it underwent a similar process. I need to have a reason. I need to know what I was writing for. And then when I compose a poem, I try to deconstruct the object that I want to write or to distort, not destroy, but to distort the object and trying to find words to do. For example, if this is the object, I find the words to do things around this by not touching the object. Then the reader can guess what I am talking about, so on and so forth. But still, I need an extra reason. I need an object to start to write a poem. For music, it's the same. I need an object. Let's say I use the words extra musical reason, but it's the same to write music. Yeah.
Well, I still observe that there, I mean, there is an urge present to write music, with salary or not. I mean, uh, at the end, I do observe it. It seems important to you. Um, leave the extra music reason aside, how you do it, but the very course of getting to a performance of your unique work, may it convey or not the extra musical with which you started? It seems that you do find that important.
Let me try to understand your question. The first part was like how urgent the extra music is for me. Like, for example, without this extra musical reason, can I compose? Was that the question?
No, it's more music, the very music for you. The very fact of producing compositions and getting them performed. Therefore, I mean, and through that, reaching to also contributing to music itself. Music is, let's say, something that exists in any case, with or without
Right.
education, with or without you or me. But with this, how important is to contribute to that for you?
It would be the same as what I have told you before. I think the music, when it is born, has its own life.
Yeah.
The audience or the performers, when they want to perform my music, I would suggest they read the program notes. But I doubt if everyone did, because I don't, force them to. So yeah. So the performers and the audience as well, they decide to um, they decide how they understand. For the performers, they decide how they understand the score. For the audience, they decide how they understand the music.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, so this is great. So if someone is performing your compositions, which I also had the privilege of doing, and I can confirm some of the parts of those score were very demanding. But yeah, so then it's good for someone that will perform your works. You
It,
do you do give quite some space there to make an interpretation, of course, on the ground of what is written.
for example, if the score itself, for example, it's a triplet and you played like a syncopation, it's wrong. I will tell you it's a triplet
Yeah,
to play the three notes equally. But what I meant is that you don't have to know, okay, the triplet is about a bunny. Just making an example. You
yeah,
don't, this is the part you don't have to know. You know what
mm,
I mean? But you have to play as a performer. You need to play the triplet as triplet.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so from there on, you
Yeah.
were mentioning when you were mentioning that you record and then analyze. And
Right.
my question is about the steps. But before I go to that question, actually, steps of, you know, what do you see as steps for a composer to get to the result? And before I ask that question, maybe it's important to also ask you, what is your notion of um, composition as a universal? So as something, let's say, do you consider there being something that's about composition that is true for everyone, everything, anytime? And what
I
and
see.
where is that? And then maybe how do you then place your own uh, specific practice in that, if at all? How do you see that?
You were asking do I think that there is a universal understanding of composition as an object? And if yes, how do I put my own position in that universe? Is that your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, yeah.
I think I think until the collapse of tonality, there was there were universal understanding of composition. And now, unfortunately, there isn't. I say unfortunately because I hope that there is, because otherwise we would lose a standard to criticize or to, let's say, judge whether a music is good or not. And actually, we are no longer judging a music as good or not. We are saying that they're all different. But I think in some point, I wouldn't say that we went too far of this notion, but I would certainly say that we certainly that we messed up some notions, which caused some of the chaos of today's music criticism. I think that it is different um, to say that everything exists in this world is meaningful, and to say that, um, well, sorry, let's put it in that way, because it's kind of philosophical. So I doubt if my, because English is only my second language, I doubt that my mind is clear enough, and also my English is enough to make this clear. But I try to do the best. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I think there is a chaos in criticism for sure in today's contemporary, because we are losing a universal understanding towards composition. And I do believe that this is necessary. Otherwise, we cannot do any criticism. If criticism itself becomes personal, which means I don't have to agree at least certain part of your understanding of criticism to criticize. My criticism will become meaningless to you. And if everyone is doing that, no criticism will become meaningful for no one. That's the problem of today's criticism, including music criticism. So I think it is different to say that you can use whatever system or whatever way to criticize, and to say you can say whatever thing as a criticism. It is the same as music composition. I think it's different to say you can have your own compositional approach as long as it is meaningful for yourself, or it is somehow yeah, meaningful for yourself. Let's think that way. And say that you can compose whatever you like, as long as it's let's say unique, or let's even not put in that way, as long as it is it is personal. Let's put it in that way. So I think it's I wouldn't say it's dangerous, because in one or another way, our civil society will move on. We will become something, and our civilization will become something. And human being, also human relationship, also human perspective about ourselves will become something in one or another way. So regardless what happened, regardless what appear and what disappear, there's nothing dangerous, unless it's something dangerous like narcissism or discrimination. We know that it's dangerous, and if we let it continue, it will have a threat to our human civilization. Otherwise, I wouldn't say anything that is dangerous or that would be a problem. But it's just a thing that I found that I personally don't feel it is so happy that we are in today's world losing a kind of universal understanding towards music. That's the answer of your first question.
Mm.
And the second question, how do I put myself in, let's say, the compositional world? For me, there are two things, and these two things are separate. One is one is that music composition as a job for me. You know, I teach music composition in the university. I got salaries from the school, and sometimes I also compose some music. I got commission fee, and sometimes I got one or another kind of fees that the most of them related with my music composition. So this is merely a tool for me to survive. Let's put in a very realistic way. This is me, a, let's say, professional composer, which means a person who use music composition to earn money. This is the first Zhuosheng Jin. So I don't even think that I need to answer the question where I put myself in the 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 musical thing, because in China it was sometimes slightly to, let's say, Soviet Union. I have to write a lot of, not a lot of things, but I have to write some of the things to keep my job. I need to write some of the things following some of, let's say, artistic aesthetic to make people happy so they continue to support me. This is part of my job. At the time I agreed the position, the realistic position in China. So this is part one. Part two is the composer Zhuosheng Jin. It's a composer in its own meaning, and it's composer as its own identity instead of an identity that attached to some other identity like a parasite. So this part of Zhuosheng Jin, let's say, is still finding his own position of the whole compositional world. As I told you, I feel confusing about today's compositional criticism, which caused confusion also toward myself. If I write this, who I am, or if I write this, who will listen to my music?
Mm-hmm.
I got the same piece, when performed in Shenzhen, an audience, they told me, okay, I love your music because I have a lot of zigzag. Um, Fortunately, that audience, he knew a lot of contemporary music. I think he's a student from some school. I don't know, and he even know my teacher. At McGill University when I did my doctorate there, Victor Lahu. He said, okay, I heard a lot of from Victor Lahu, from composers earlier than him. He say, hi, a lot of people. So he said he loved my music. And the same piece, um, a few days after, played in Vienna, as the school traveled the piece to Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
I went with them, and an audience, I think he is a faculty member of a local music school. He told me and said, I think your piece is very interesting. I used to live in France a few years. I think I heard a lot of sound when I was in France, and left. So from different area, different people, they understand music differently. And I also got exactly the same piece. I got from other Chinese audience. They told me, Zhuosheng, why every other pieces in the same concert they have melody? Where is your melody? I didn't hear any melody. I feel lost. I feel so strange. So I got totally different uh feedback from different audiences, and I try to, in a way, um not being affected by them too much, because there is a very clear way, there is a very clear technical source of my composition. Even I now try in different pieces, try different ways to depart from that source. Otherwise, it will become too strong and I will be lost in the spectral music, which was the source. But still, I have a clear musical background, a compositional source, technically saying background, culturally saying I have the Chinese traditional culture. I can't say how much convince convincing that I understand Chinese culture, but still it is my cultural root. So I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know what kind of music that I will write. I would just let it survive. I don't know whether it will survive or not, but all what I can do is to send it to the compositional world and see if it can survive. I can't judge, and I don't know how to judge the exact position of my work in the compositional world.
So if I understand correct, you give quite of an importance to what you said, compositional source. So to knowing where you come from also. This is in the light of addressing a question of what are the steps for a composer to achieve a result in composition. And we didn't define what that result is. We already touched on the lack of perhaps a standard definition. But
Yeah.
and what are the steps for Zhuosheng Jin to achieve that result?
I see. I see. That would be much better, the second part, because the first part is a very big question and it's very difficult to answer. But I can still try. I think, again, there are two ways. One is the realistic treatment for a composer. Around 2019, I realized that I need a job.
Yes.
So to participate in these competitions were more or less from a realistic reason, that if I need a job, they must find my bio strong. If my bio is not strong, nobody will listen to or read my music. Let's put it in a very straightforward way. That's simply the reality of at least most of the areas, or people can disagree, but for me, that's mostly the reality of not only the compositional world, but many of the world, that a strong bio is the most important thing for one to survive, right? So I think for a composer, specifically for me, at a young age, I must participate competitions, try to promote myself, participate in music festivals, workshops for young composers, try to work with established musicians to make my music heard by as many people as possible. This is a realistic part. And from the artistic part, I think, one, it is a lifelong journey to find out what kind of thing you want. Who are your friends? What I mean was not like you want to be friend with some people and be enemy with another. I'm talking about a community, not in its communist meaning, but a community. I think every single individual in this world, they need a community to realize their real identity. They don't need to tell this to anyone else, but they need to find themselves being part of the community, right? So for me, I think it's a long journey for me to find my friends, for me to find what things are meaningful, what kind of life that I'm looking for, and therefore what kind of music that I can represent that for my as myself. It's a lifelong journey, and I need to, and it takes time to reach to the final goal, which is sublime, transcendental, out of word, not describable, but it's there. And in a way, I will be affected heavily by the environment. For example, when I was in Canada, I did my undergraduate and the master's in United States and my doctorate in Canada. When I was in Canada, when I was traveling in Europe, when I was back to my own country, when I was in South America, I speak differently. And I even feel myself for some things that I believe different. It is not that I don't have a focus of my own life, or I don't have a belief, not religiously saying, but uh, rurally saying that I don't have a belief.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because my daily conversation, my daily expression in terms of my gestures and my language will be heavily affected by the environment that I live. So now I come back to China and work in China. My perspective toward the world, my compositional approach, even my daily talking, behaving will be heavily affected, sometimes even subconsciously, by the environment that I live. And this is a very important part to consider what I was just said, the way to find my own identity. So I think artistically, I am in an individual, always part of a group. And it is a long journey for me to find my true friend from the groups. It's a plural, from the groups that I am in, and to even secretly gather all my friends to be a community and finally survive in this community. Not for a specific goal, because a community is not for a specific or concrete goal, but just to be more clear of myself, who I am, what I want to do, what I want to say, what I want to express, what I want to write. This is a lifelong journey for me, both as a composer and as a human being. I hope I'm clear.
Yes, that's wonderfully answered. And I think also a great point where we can conclude this conversation. So, yes, thank you so much for sharing with everyone all of these aspects of your compositional practice, and also importantly your views. And as you said, perhaps at some point a sort of a hint of a philosophy behind it. And I think you worded it wonderfully. Also for me, English is a second language, and it might be as well for many of our viewers. So, any final thoughts you would like to share for our viewers? I think
try to find my music on SoundCloud and YouTube and so on.
again, try to find.
Try to find my composition on SoundCloud and YouTube and other social media.
And give
I'm
it
available.
Yes, yes, definitely. We will share your biography and
Great.
the links to where you can be found. Okay, thank you again for joining
Thank you. Thank
Synopsis.
you, Neža. Thank you.
And yeah, until next time.
Have a good day. See you next time.